Psalm 13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me.
Just cross the river, Joshua. It's a river, for Pete's sake. It's not the Red Sea. By comparison, it's tiny. How hard can it be? Just cross the river, Joshua. Of course, the river's 200 miles long. It's 100 foot across and it's 10 foot deep. That's not easy with children and old people and animals and equipment. Uncrossable is how it looked. But it only looked uncrossable, regardless of how it looked. That's not how it was. Because the second those feet hit the Jordan, right? The second those feet hit the Jordan. Which is why most of us labor in this life, right? Because even although we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we have signed up for salvation by grace through faith, we still want those waters to part before our feet touch them. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But it's how it looked. It's how it always looks. Jericho, impregnable. Goliath, undefeatable. The wilderness, inhospitable. Rome, indestructible. Egypt, inescapable. 1,000 men with the jawbone of an ass. Absolutely, entirely, utterly invincible. But impossible is only how it looked. God eats impossible for breakfast, because regardless of how it looks, that's never how it is. It's almost as though every author in Scripture got together, even although they didn't know the writings would be combined into one book. They all wrote the same story. Regardless of how it looks, it's not how it is. I confessed to you last week that Sundays can't come quick enough for me. And where that is true, I still struggle, because I would sincerely, I would prefer to have 10 days to work on a sermon than 5. In fact, I've got a sermon right now that I've been wrestling with for 4 weeks, and it refuses to take shape. It refuses to arrange itself. I know that some sermons can sometimes sound as though they were thrown together on Saturday night without much forethought. In fact, I know a preacher who did that, and he boasted to me one time. He said, "Oh, I could write 4 sermons in a day." I said to him, "I know, I've heard them." We're still friends. But time, as you'll have noticed, is just one more commodity, one more thing in life that, if we're not careful, can be squandered as easily as we squander everything else. How many people died last night begging God for one more day, this day that so many of us in here have already taken for granted? They were begging last night to be awake this morning, and they're not. James says, "What is your life?" And then he answers it. You're a mist. You're an early morning fog that disappears, evaporates as quickly as it appears. Whoa. what was that? That was your life, man. Do I get another shot? No, you get one go around. Time, you'll have noticed, when your team is losing, time flies. Those last 5 minutes, when your team's losing, the time, the second, and then when your team is winning, those last 5 minutes take about 3.5 years. Time, we don't have a handle on it. How long, David says, how long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Spurgeon says, if the reader has never yet found occasion to use the language of this brief ode, he will do so before long, if he be a man after God's own heart. Spurgeon says it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. It's an eventuality. Invariably, every child of God will reach a moment when they're asking God, how long? How long must I bear with this? How long must I pray for this? How long must I seek your hand? How long, O Lord? And it's not a bad question to ask. It's the same question the martyrs ask in Revelation 6 from under the throne. How long, O sovereign Lord, until you avenge our blood? I think we can all understand what Peter Berger meant when he said, theology is far too important to be left to the theologians. Love that. No one's ungrateful for the scholarship that's been poured into the Bible, right? We understand that even without it having to be explained to us, we understand the ignorance of comments like, well, I don't need the scholars, I've got my Bible, which you wouldn't have without the scholars. So the educated ones, the scholars, the intellectuals, they are important. They have their place. In fact, if you want to know just how important the intellectuals are, simply ask one. Which is why we generally don't like them, right? But I still think, I do, I've met enough of them. I've rubbed enough shoulders with them in our colleges. And even although they will not readily admit it, I do still think that it's a deep thorn in the flesh to the intellectuals that the people Jesus chose to surround himself with were, as the book of Acts described them, uneducated men. I think the intellectuals feel the same type of sting there that wealthy people feel when they read Jesus. It's not wrong to be wealthy. It's not wrong to be educated. But if we think therein lies no danger, we'd be fooling ourselves. And we'll certainly take time to note that the Bible records them as uneducated, not unintelligent. Only the unintelligent would conflate intelligence with education. But uneducated is what they're described as being. And of course, when I point this out to my scholastic friends, they'll usually come in with, well, what about Paul? Who, as you know, was an absolute genius. What about Paul? Explain Paul. And I'll say, all right, Paul was chosen to prove that even the educated could be saved. That's not true. In fact, I know it's not true. The educated assure me it's not true. There's more truth there than meets the eye. But my point is that anyone who thinks that great biblical insight is limited to the educated, to the professors, to the classroom, or intelligence itself is limited to those places, have obviously never stepped foot outside a classroom. And given that life experience plays such an important role in understanding Scripture, we'd be fools to ignore the opinion of anyone who shares in the struggle that we face. Because it's the who, the author of Psalm 13, that lends it so much weight. These aren't words you'll find in a Christian bookstore penned by the hour's favorite Christian author. It isn't some college professor painstakingly describing suffering for us. These aren't the words of someone simply pondering spirituality. This is David, giant slayer, Israel's poet laureate, man after God's own heart. But more important than any of that, more important than all of that, these are the words of your brother. And in essence, as you'll have noticed when you read the psalm or heard it read by Will, you'll have noticed that what David is writing is Hebrew blues, which is what the lament psalms are. They're Hebrew blues. And he asks the question 4 times, how long, how long, how long, how long? In fact, if you want to read this psalm correctly, try and imagine that little blues riff at the end of each line. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Down, 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 down. How long will you hide your face from me? Down, 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 down. How long will you... That's what he's writing. And it isn't even particularly good writing. It's overly repetitive. From a critical point of view, it's redundantly overly repetitive. But when you're in pain, the last thing you care about is song structure. All you're wanting to do is let the emotion out, which is why we don't build doctrine from the Psalms, right? They're songs. By definition, they are poetically licensed. When the great Etta James, stands up and sings, I would rather be blind, boy, than to see you walk away from me. Baby, 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 I would rather be blind, boy, than to see you walk away from me. No one's listening to that song thinking that Etta would actually rather be blind than miss out on a second date with Captain Marvelous, right? It's poetic. She's not asking to be blind. She's trying to convey the depth of a broken heart. So it is overly repetitive, and no one knows exactly what David is going through here, but it is what makes the psalm so instantly arresting. And Spurgeon insists that these are the words that every reader, every man and woman after God's own heart will instantly recognize and identify with. How long, how long, how long, how long? There are questions to ask, and David wants answers. First question he asks, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? What a question to lay at the feet of the omniscient one, the all-knowing one. Have you forgot about me? No, is the answer. No, David, I've not forgotten about you. Don't you know the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases? I mean, I know Jeremiah's not been born yet, David, but you've at least observed around you that my love never ceases. My mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. But then, all the best advice in the world is often of little consolation when you're as low as David. Perhaps you've been there. Doesn't matter, really. Doesn't matter what the person coming to console you has to say. It doesn't matter the depth of the truth that they're parting toward you, trying to help you. You've got no ears for it. You've been in the situation the other way around. You can tell the person that you're trying to console, that you're trying to speak life into at this moment, has no ears for it, because David's in the middle of winter. You know what I mean by that, right? We're never long into winter before we've already forgot how beautiful and warm summer was, right? Not an Arizona summer. Definitely not a Texas summer. I'm talking about a summer where it's nice. That kind of summer, that kind of beauty, that kind of warmth. Not a summer that grabs you the second you step foot outside. Anyway, I noticed you kept that from me, Rob, when you told me how great Mineral Wells was. 10 minutes before deciding whether or not to come, I said to Sarah, you know, Rob never mentioned the summer. David is going to have to learn the lesson that every single one of us at one point in our walk with God has to learn, that a hidden face is no sign of a forgetful heart. It's a message that every parent stresses upon their child when their child finally flies the coop. Maybe they go to college, maybe get their own house, maybe. But every parent tells them the same thing. Hey, just because we're no longer with you physically is any indication that we're any farther from you than we've ever been. That a hidden face is no sign of a forgetful heart. How long will you hide your face from me, David says. I can't see you, God. Paul says, the heavens declare. David wrote words like that. Said, I can't see you. How long will you hide your face from me? Look, unquestionably, this world that we have built, with its ceaseless brutality and pain and suffering, undoubtedly it has a God-denying look about it. But maybe on certain occasions, maybe the answer that needs to come our way needs to be as brutally swift as, obviously you can't see him. You're not even looking at him. You're looking at everything else but him. And someone replies, no, I pray every day. Well, praying every day for God to bend the entire universe to your little whims and pleasures, asking God to revolve the planet and the other 7.5 billion of us around your little life isn't focused on God. That's focused on you. It's him you have to look at. It's relationship that God is after. And it takes two to tango. And how many of us labor so unnecessarily long because we'd rather pick at the scab than apply the medicine. If God is a God of anything, then he's a God of order and of structure and of sobriety. This isn't a game we're playing. The stakes here are eternal. And it calls for serious, sober, clear-minded, measured, faithful thinking. James says on the subject of wisdom, we'll take it applies everywhere else. James says when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like the wave of a sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think he'll receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. I don't like alcohol. I never liked to taste, I didn't grow up in the church, so I had my little flings. But even when I took it, I didn't like it, thankfully. Really, thankfully, my father was an alcoholic. So I was glad I didn't like the taste. I just took it for the effect. But it's not even that sobriety that I'm talking about. There's only been a few occasions in my life when I messed around with it. But upon reflection of 59 years, if I think that the only time I've been drunk was due to alcohol, I'd be fooling myself. On more than one occasion, the only reason I couldn't see God was because of me. And it might not have been alcohol, but I was drunk. I was drunk on self. I was drunk on sin. I was drunk on you name it. God's not hiding, brethren. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to explain that the more sober and clear-minded we are, the easier He'll be to find. Because of these words, how long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? It's because of that, these verses that convince us that David isn't simply wallowing in self-pity, which is a great temptation for humans. But I don't think it's what's at play here. Whatever David's going through, it's clear that it's painful. And it's clear that it's relentless. But to his question, how long, how long, how long, how long? Well, just as long as it takes you to get to verse 3, David. Because in verse 3, the entire psalm, like a lot of psalms, begin to turn toward God. Look on me and answer, God. Give light to my eyes. Now the focus is shifting. No longer blaming, no longer accusing, no excuses. Now he's calling on God. Eyes off of the problem, eyes on God. Now we're talking. Now he's in with a chance. If you belong to the world, Jesus said, if you belong to the world, it would love you as it loves its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. This is why the world hates you. Jesus said, this structure that we have erected within God's world, our world, the world that we have built with our hands, Jesus said, you've constructed something that if you come after my God, that world will hate you. I know we don't like to hear it because we love to chalk up all those likes on Facebook. We want to be everybody's friend and we want to be a friend to everybody. Jesus says, don't let it fool you. It's a whole ball of wax. It's lies. It's fake. It's hypocrisy. In fact, it's so fake we're warned that friendship with it is hatred toward God. I remember, this is a long time ago when I was back in Scotland. It was at Christmas, and it was a commercial for British Telecom, our telephone system. And, you know, the cameras in this room, this living room, this darkly lit, obviously neglected room. And as the camera moves forward, you see there's someone sitting in a chair, and it's a woman. Well, it's an old woman, and she's frail. And you know, the camera goes in and zoom, and obviously there's a phone beside her, there's a telephone beside her, and it's, when was the last time you called your mother? You know, the quintessential mother who's being neglected. And then the audacity of these swines, these lying, heartless swines, put the little banner, British Telecom, because we care. Liars. They could call my mom for free. Never called her once. They don't care. They care because every time you pick up the phone, they get money. That's what they care about. By the time we get to the last two verses, David's turned the entire thing around, and I love the phrasing. But I trust in your unfailing love. It's as though he's rebuking himself. It's as though he's wakening himself up. And it's as though he's saying to himself, wait a minute, what am I talking about? How long? What am I doing casting doubt and judgment? What am I doing questioning? I'm not a questioner, I'm a truster. How did I get here? What am I doing here? Finding some sort of pathetic satisfaction and claiming to be a victim. Saved from the wrath that is to come. Victim? Adopted into God's own family at God's own expense. You're a victim. You've had your past forgiven. You've had your present infused with profound meaning and purpose. Your eternity is secured. Victim? Are you kidding me? Pete's sake, I just read last night, our great government's lost 70,000 children. 70,000 children have come across the border. We don't know where they are. You're a victim. Maybe we need some of those swift and brutal conversations. All right, I lost my place. All right. But it's although David is saying to himself, no, look, I know how it looks. I know it does look like that. He's not denying that it looks like that. I know how it feels. It feels as though I'm trapped. It looks as though I don't belong around spiritual things or I don't belong around spiritual people. But I know it's not true because it always looks like that and it's never how it looks. I know that whatever it is that I'm going through, it's not that he has left me, for he will not abandon his own. I know that regardless of how it looks, it's not how it is, because it's how it looked to Abraham and it never was. It's how it looked to Moses and it never was. And how it looked to Joshua and it never was. It's as though the entire scripture in every book is trying to get it through our head. Open your eyes. It's not how it is. It's lying to you. It's lies. In fact, we of a Christian persuasion, we now look back and we say, undoubtedly, we remember a day outside Jerusalem, a young man hanging on a cross, where the only rational conclusion that one could draw was that his God had abandoned him. That's what it looked like. That's not how it was. Someone says, well, what about Psalm 22? Jesus even quoted it. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Dear God, will no one read the rest of that psalm? Read it. Read it, and you tell me if you see a God abandoning his son. So because of all that, David finishes with, I will sing to the Lord. Why, David? And I love this. No effort to impress. No effort to prove anything. David simply reflects over what he's experienced in life and says, because he's been good to me. What a God. What a God who takes the tears and the pain of the afflicted and turns it all in 6 short verses into a psalm of glory and praise. The application is almost too obvious to point out. If we have felt, or if we are feeling what David feels in verses 1 and 2, is it too much to ask that we do what David did in verses 3 and 4, so that we can say what David said in verses 5 and 6, that when it comes to us, oh, we will sing to the Lord. And should the world ever ask us why, we won't feel we have to prove anything. we'll simply reply, oh, He's been good to us. God bless you.